Queen and Collins uses GPT's original brief, which was to reposition the workplace and retail asset for urban opportunity. The design celebrates neo-Gothic heritage of the heritage-listed ANZ Gothic Bank, Cathedral Room, Former Stock Exchange and the 90s Tower, and draws upon its Venetian influences for urban intrigue, delight and passage to connect this quarter block back into the city. So 3 frontages, Queen's, Collins and Little Collins Street. And it's a cluster of heritage buildings as well as the more recent ANZ Tower. So quarter of a city block, so quite a substantial portion of the city to reconnect. In 2017, when we started on the project, which was won through competition, we had this sort of very sort of corporate experience of the site and language of it. So the interior was really one contiguous space, this kind of quality, very much only for the people who used it day to day. And then the various heritage buildings, there was works that had happened to those over the years and had in some way sort of smeared some of them together. The magnificent cathedral room, which even though it was technically publicly accessible, was really, there was no real reason to go to it, a bit of a dead end space. The open air areas had been closed up with atria, so this sort of feeling. So we took this on more as an urban project, noting also the desire for a better quality of retail and workplace. And on the left, if you see, that was the existing figure ground, which I sometimes describe as this kind of blancmange of all of these buildings smeared together. So the middle diagram is where we started to think, what if we do some judicious editing, clear out some of those changes that have been made, reinstate some of the gaps between the buildings, some of the open air, and if you like, a very simple mantra, laneway, not lobby. So a network of interstitial space and a proliferation of edges for retail and activation opportunities. The third sort of theme along this is this idea of city within a city, that we had these 3 heritage buildings with distinctive qualities and characters. We wanted to amplify those, but also introduce a further sort of 4 blocks, if you like, for retail that work in the podium and also give them individual character too. So a way to modulate the space. Some other little early diagrams, laneway, not lobby, the idea of civic doors open to the city around the building's perimeter, and a reactivated street edge through some facade works. I should say too, BVN did the workplace fit outs and the tower refurb. So we were responsible for the ground plane for the first 3 stories and the end of trip. Wellness connection to environment was important too, especially prescient with COVID and the upgrade to lobbies and amenities. Other ideas, this idea of urban furniture and the sort of spectacle of urban life, the social possibilities of the workplace that you'll see introduced throughout the spaces. So it's a variety of architectures. It has many levels, quite complex levels, and now is more open to the sky and to the city. And this cluster of heritage and recent architectures, pulling them out and celebrating their variations. Now, it's a fairly dense plan. We just dropped this in to show you all of these elements coming together. What might help is just this, describing what is actually the sort of passageway that anyone could take through the building, as you can see here with the pink highlighted. An isometric to help as well with all the levels. And I should just say, here it shows the new ways of passing through the site, whether in a north-south direction from, say, Little Collins to Collins Street, the yellow lines, but also through in east-west direction to Queen Street. And really important move, what was a previous loading dock at the back of the cathedral room, we introduced a courtyard and connection to Briscoe Lane. So there's another little laneway as well that's now possible, and also a way to activate and turn the cathedral space into something that can be passed through. These are the various retail tenancies that the existing heritage ones, as well as these 3 new ones, and then the pathways through those. Because of course, this sort of what's good for the retail also works well from an urban design point of view. This idea of campiellos was introduced. They're really mini squares. We took that term from Venice, Venice being a draw card because of the neo-Gothic architecture of the heritage buildings. And we thought the urban intrigue, that delight and joy of discovery was something we could introduce here. So there's different scaled campiellos. Commercial tenancies, each of the buildings is, before you had one entry point and then you had to wayfind across the whole site from the upper level floors. Now you can enter the site into the different buildings as little mini offices, if you like. So it has sort of more direct wayfinding for visitors. So keep going. So this idea of being an activated precinct, more connected with the city too, rather than being a sort of secured interior space. So a quick walk around, reinstating and amplifying the gaps between the buildings. You'll see if you visit on Collins Street, the introduction of an accessible ramp on Collins for access there. Some works we did to the facade for the sort of lower portion to bring the ground and the first floor more connected to the street, especially at those upper levels. And then these large doorways that really invite people to enter the building and pass through it. It can be a shortcut through the city. The lanterns are a sort of device, a wayfinding device throughout. You can see we start in these sort of darkened spaces and then there's a modulation of light as you move through too. Things like bridges and so on is part of that idea of urban spectacle, looking out over these large spaces and voids, connecting with the street and across the space with each other. So that idea of the mini city. This area here is what takes you into the tower lift cores, and also introducing beautiful stairs to really celebrate and encourage people to use stairs as a way of moving through to these upper level shared workspace areas. As I say, they're fit out by BVN, but here you can see those new windows and connection to the trees and outside. So much more connection to outside than previously. Enjoyment of stairs, then the lift core to the tower. Little waiting areas, part of this urban furniture that I talked about before. So moving through from this main Campiello, we move towards the central Campiello here, a lighter palette, large doors which were done for internal comfort. So on the right sort of weather, you can have these doors open and it's sort of completely open air, and then can also work for winter. Things like, thank you, wells, things to stand around, do a little meeting. As you can see here, just open air, seeing the sky, real rain, real wind. The cathedral room, one of the windows there that we see from the southern Campiello, beautiful space, underutilised. So the big battle, but we got there, introduction of a door to the northern end, connecting out to the cathedral court, which links in turn to Briscoe Lane. So that passage through. End of trip is below that floor of the cathedral room. A lovely space, so we hope that encourages people to use bikes and so on to get to work. And then moving towards Collins Street, again, new lift cores and accessibility addressed here to take people up to that 280 Collins Street address. So just to finish off, a little AXO, I hope that helps you navigate. It's quite a complex project, but perhaps questions might be a good way if there's any more queries. Have I missed anything obvious, Michael?